Locked On Podcast Network presents Locked On Sports Today.
The Minnesota Timberwolves swarmed Nikola Jokic and the defending champs in Game 7. Also, the Pacers dominated their Game 7 at Madison Square Garden. And Luka Doncic and the Dallas Mavericks, they took care of business without a Game 7. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDON for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply.
I'm Peter Bukowski, starting your day with the can't-miss stories and biggest debates in sports. You're Locked On Sports Today.
Searching all major sports. Found.
Let's start with the biggest story.
The Minnesota Timberwolves were down 58-38 in the second half. They were facing the defending NBA champion Denver Nuggets in Denver. Then they won the game by 8 points. How did the greatest win in Timberwolves history come to be? Our Locked On Wolves postcast broke it down.
I asked all those questions off the top. Are you shaking? How's your heart? Answer those for me. How are you doing right now?
I got two words for you, Sam. Believe that. I was up in a defensive stance. I was yelling at the TV. I was clapping with every single possession. I was screaming. I was slapping the couch after stops at timeouts. I came downstairs. I probably went through 3 bottles of water in that fourth quarter, trying to get my voice right to come on here and love up everybody on the Minnesota Timberwolves for a 30-point turnaround on the road in Denver against the defending champs to win not one, not 2, but 3 road games against the defending champs in Denver after they lost one time all season or all playoffs last year in Denver. My hands, I don't know. What do we see? Can you see my hands? Are they're still shaking a little bit?
They're tingling. They're tingling.
My heart's great. My heart's great. I can't feel my hands. It was just like Game 6 at Target Center, man. I still have a headache from being there that night. 4 days later, 3 days later, whatever it is. And now, man, my hands will just be shaking until we get this thing rolling at Target Center on Wednesday. So I can't wait. But oh my goodness, what a fourth quarter for really the whole second half from the Timberwolves to snatch this thing away.
Yeah, as Jeff points out, they beat Scott Foster as well, but that might be the good luck charm. I think their record's actually really good with Scott Foster now for some reason. We'll get into that. Yeah, it's actually above average. The Minnesota Timberwolves were dead. I declared them dead. I was one of many. I said it's over. They end the first half with a clunky 90 seconds. They had the ball down 10, chance to cut it to single digits. You'd be feeling okay. Instead, they bungle a couple possessions. They have a botched fast break. Nuggets go up 15 at the break. First 90 seconds out of halftime, the Nuggets have a quick 5-0 run. It's a 20-point game. So it's 58-38, Jack. And I thought to myself in my mind, okay, I mean, if the Timberwolves, are going to win this thing, they got to get to 100, I think. The Nuggets would then have to score 42 or less, or less than 42 to not get 100 in basically 2 full quarters of basketball. That's not possible. I declared their time of death, like 10 minutes, 30 seconds to go in the third quarter. From that point on that I buried this team, they go on a 60-32 run. That is absurd against Nikola Jokic and Jamal Murray, and I don't know how it happened. What's your best interpretation as to how they flipped the switch so out of nowhere to do what they just did?
It takes guys with a ton of dog and a ton of heart in them, and it's what we saw from the Minnesota Timberwolves all season. I would like to issue a formal apology for all of our everydayers here that have had to deal with our horrific medical examining performance from Sam and I over the last 10 days or so with falsely declaring people dead. But my goodness, I mean, it just felt like. I talked to Rudy Gobert in the locker room after Game 6, and Rudy told me, he said, I feel like that team does not have the capacity to play as hard as they can for as long as we can. So if we play as hard as we can last longer than they can. And that is exactly what happened in this game. The Timberwolves, were really stuck in the mud offensively, but their defense kept them in it. And we'd see games last year, 2 years ago, 3 years ago. Well, that's a 30, 35 point hole at halftime. But instead, it's 15. They band together. You get Anthony Edwards on Jamal Murray. Jamal Murray for the Nuggets, I want to say he was sitting on 24 points at halftime.
Yes.
And he had 35 so he had 11 points the rest of the second half. Anthony Edwards totally got in Jamal Murray and forced him to go east to west instead of north south and all their 2-man game stuff. And you could just tell that Murray and Jokic had zero confidence in the guys around him. I mean, you look at after the third quarter, no one else on the Nuggets had more than 5 points. And the Wolves did a great job of pressuring those two guys and forcing everyone else to beat them. And no one else was able to beat them.
Stay up to date on the Timberwolves all year by subscribing to Locked On Sports Today and Locked On Wolves on your favorite podcast app and on YouTube. Thanks for making Locked On Sports Today your first listen. Coming up, the Indiana Pacers are Eastern Conference Finals bound. Before we get to that, Xander Schauffele has won a major for the first time. With killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, and their best price guarantee, Game Time takes the guesswork out of buying tickets. They're obsessed with finding ways to help you save money on tickets. Game Time has deals on tickets right up to the start of the event, and even an hour after it starts. It's the place to find last-minute seats. Find exclusive flash deals and sponsored deals on tickets for football, basketball, baseball, concerts, comedy, theater, and more. With Zone Deals, you pick the section and Game Time picks the seats for big-time savings. And the Game Time guarantee means you'll always get the best price. If you find tickets in the same section and row for less, Game Time will credit you 110% of the difference. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the free app and new users can get $20 off their first purchase with code Locked On. Terms apply. That's code Locked On for $20 off your first purchase with Game Time. Download the Game Time app today. Last minute tickets, the lowest price guaranteed. Are you watching Fox Sports or ESPN on your TV all day? Have to turn down the volume with all that shouting? Make the switch to Locked On Sports Today, a free 24/7 sports streaming channel programmed for you every day to bring you the biggest stories without all the screaming. Locked On Sports Today brings you can't-miss analysis, opinions, and news streaming 24/7 on YouTube or the free Amazon Fire TV channels app, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. He may be just 30 years old, but it still feels like finally for Xander Schauffele. He gets his first major championship win at the PGA Championship at Valhalla. He shot a record 21 under, the lowest 72-hole score to par, and the lowest 72-hole scoring total in a major championship.
Yeah, I mean, I've become very patient, not knocking off any wins in the last couple of years. The people that are closest to me know how stubborn I can be. So winning. I said it earlier, it is a result. I mean, this is awesome. It's super sweet. But when I break it down, I'm really just proud of how I handled certain moments on the course today. Different from the past.
Xander Schauffele wasn't the only one to make history on the golf course on Sunday. Nelly Korda is incredible. She notches her 14th LPGA Tour win, but that's not the cool part. She has now 6 wins in her last 7 starts. She's the first player since Inbee Park to record 6 wins in a single season. That was back in 2013. And she passes Stacey Lewis, Betty Jamieson, Rosie Jones in all-time LPGA Tour wins by an American since 1980. She is in rarefied air right now. The Texas Rangers dropped their series against the LA Angels 2-1, but more importantly, maybe without ALCS MVP Adolis Garcia. Garcia collided with teammate Marcus Semien in Game 2 and was ruled out of the Game 3 with a forearm injury that required an MRI. The New York Yankees are white hot right now after extending their league-leading 7-game winning streak with a sweep of the Chicago White Sox.
The weakest link in their rotation is Garrett Cole, and that's because he can't be on the mound. Right. I mean, they're that good. I mean, they've been unbelievably incredible. There is not a pitcher you can really complain about. The worst pitcher in their rotation right now is Nestor Cortez.
Right, and he had an amazing game on Friday.
Exactly. So that's the worst pitcher in their rotation. Their bullpen you really can't complain about. They're clicking on all cylinders at the moment. And there's not a lot of times in a team's trajectory that you're ever going to really be able to say that. And this is one of them. They are clicking on all cylinders. They're getting contributions from every aspect of the lineup. And there's really not a lot you can really complain about.
It was Game 7, Madison Square Garden, the Eastern Conference semifinals, and the Indiana Pacers could not miss. They set a new playoff record. They shoot 67% from the field. They absolutely dog-walked the New York Knicks 130-109, and they advance. They will face the Boston Celtics in the Eastern Conference Finals. Tony East from Locked On Pacers joins me now. And Tony, this was a team all season who we saw could absolutely explode offensively, but this was next level. I mean, literally record-setting stuff.
It was unbelievable. I mean, I've seen them do this before, obviously, because they had for a while the best offense the NBA had ever seen. But in a Game 7 that they came in and they said, you know, these games are all about who plays harder. These games can be ugly and sloppy. It was none of that. They played exactly how they wanted. They did everything they wanted offensively. They got whatever shot they hoped to get for almost the entire game. And not only did they get the shot they wanted, they made it almost every single time, like you said. And let's be clear, Peter, they shot 67.1% because they beat the record by 0.1. They need that percentage to have the record. But that says everything. I mean, they started 20 for 25. No matter what the Knicks could have done, injuries or no injuries, they're losing to this Pacers team when they play that well like they did today. They hit their identity. They hit it in stride, and they had no chance of losing in a game that was unlike a typical Game 7. They just absolutely dominated.
Yeah, we think of Tyrese Halliburton as the engine for this team, but Aaron Nesmith was 8 of 8. Andrew Nembhard was 8 of 10. Miles Turner was 7 for 11. Like that's not going to happen every game, of course, but that is indicative of what we saw in this one on Sunday. And to my mind, this, although they're not going to set the record every game, this is how you beat the Boston Celtics. If you're going to put together a roadmap, it is, hey, just have a couple outlier games offensively and hope to get lucky once or twice.
I know the Nuggets did too, so maybe I'm wrong here, but Pacers are one of the only teams that beat Boston twice in the regular season, right? Like they've already proven to themselves that they can do it. One of those being that epic in-season tournament quarterfinal game that really kind of put the Pacers on the map for this season. And, you know, their offense was absolutely dominant back at that stage of the season. And the second time they won was the game Halliburton got injured and their season really flipped. So some symmetry there. But yeah, in this game, I mean, Aaron Nesmith 8 for 8 and like pull up twos after getting by it. Like who expect Aaron Nesmith to take that shot? And he made a bunch of them. I think all 8 of Andrew Nembhard's makes stopped the Knicks run. Like it was timely shots. It was hard shots. I mean, that's what kind of made it stand out, is like the Knicks would go in this little burst and MSG's just lighting up in here. It's going crazy. And then the number of deflating, like, oh, I heard today was like matching the number I've ever heard for like a good month of basketball before. It was unbelievable. Turner, of course, like you said, making them too. So that is how you beat the Celtics, especially without their rangy injured defender Porzingis. We'll see how long he's out for in the series. But you know, I don't think anyone's going to pick the Pacers to beat the Celtics. But I mean, if they do this even once or twice, they'll give themselves a chance to be in the series at least for longer than either the first 2 Boston opponents.
To your eyes, was this the healthiest that Tyrese Halliburton has looked in a while?
Yeah, you know, it's up there. I usually do my gauge with him on his dunking, and he didn't dunk in this game, which doesn't mean he's not healthy, but he's had a lot of games, at least in the last, let's say, month and a half to me, where I've thought, yes, he looks extremely healthy today, but it hasn't always been the case, as you point out. And he was finally off the injury report before Game 6 for the first time since, I believe, Game 3 of the first round. So, you know, clearly health growing for him. He had 2 good games in a row, great today. And you know what really got Halliburton going beyond health is when he gets a heckling fan, there's like a third level of Tyrese Halliburton that's above all NBA, all heckle Halliburton. That happened in the first half, and he's pointing at the guy. They're making the same hand motions back and forth at each other. It's not Spike Lee. It's not going to go down in a 30 for 30 documentary or anything like that, but it's what he needed. He had it in a couple of regular season games. He loves playing on the road, and he certainly looked very healthy. He couldn't miss. He got to his spots, and that's what stars do. They lead teams to big wins.
If you're going to just try and put in perspective what we've seen over the last 2 rounds, I mean, they get a little lucky, of course, with the Bucks and some of the injuries. They get a little lucky with the Knicks and some of the injuries. How do you put into context what we've seen over the last 2 rounds?
Yeah, you know, the argument, for lack of a better term, I always made when they were playing the Bucks was like, The Bucks won a championship in 2021. No one remembers how injured the Nets were in the second round, right? And that series was epic.
Well, except Celtics fans, but yeah, go ahead.
Right, but like, the Clippers when they were really injured and they made no one remembers, right? That what is remembered is how far you got. And so yes, the nerdiest of fans, and I mean this in an endearing way, the nerdiest of fans will remember the context of all these series, but what are the Pacers supposed to do? Not feel good about it? They're in the conference finals for the first time in a decade, and only I think the fourth time this century, right? Like that's a huge deal and a very impressive feat for a team that is starting like has like 5 guys on rookie contracts in their rotation. And they've had certainly high peaks, like including tonight, where you think, well, it wouldn't have mattered who was healthy. For the Knicks, Brunson was playing. OG was played, although he shouldn't have. In this game, they had everybody but Julius Randle, who you'd consider major, and they steamrolled them, right? So like they're not going to feel bad about it. But if they get steamrolled by Boston, people will, of course, bring it up forever, but they deserve it. They've played better than the teams across from them, and they're here. It's unbelievable.
Stay up to date on the Indiana Pacers all year by subscribing to Locked On Sports today and Locked On Pacers on your favorite podcast app and on YouTube. Coming up, Luka Doncic closed out the series against Oklahoma City in dominant fashion. Dallas Mavericks eliminated the Oklahoma City Thunder in 6 games. Has Luka Doncic taken the next step as a postseason superstar?
But a triple-double for Luka, and I thought he was in complete and total control of this game offensively. And it's just he's a killer. And listen, I had a great time in Oklahoma City when I went to watch the game, but after the game, I was talking some friendly stuff with some of the Thunder fans, and they were like, Shay's coming. And I was talking about Luka. I was like, you guys don't know what a killer is yet. You just don't. You guys have a great young team, but you don't know what a killer really does when it's time to go in the playoffs. And that's exactly what Luka did the last 2 games.
Yeah, man, Luka Doncic is a superstar in the truest sense of the word. I mean, he exists as a guy who you really have no qualms about when you talk about like the big moments and a knee sprain that is something that is not better yet. We talk about mentality. You could talk about adversity when it comes to not getting a whistle going your way. All those things. When push came to shove and his team needed him, he stepped up in a big way, and that's something that we knew he was capable of, and did it while also still being the identity of this team. Like they still did it with him at the center of all of this. 29, 10, and 10. Like another Luka Doncic triple-double. He is consistent in a way that you expect a superstar to be in the postseason.
Is that 3 straight triple-doubles?
I believe that is, yeah.
Luka, there's moments in this game where you thought that he was going to regress back to the refs are just taking me out of this game. I don't have anything to give this game because of the way Tony Brothers is calling it.
You can poke holes in it. The defense doesn't always look great, though he was better defensively this season. He hasn't always been the most in shape player in the NBA. The complaining to the officials is tiring. That's never going to change and has not changed. It only seemed to, in fact, magnify when he was playing hurt. But Luka Doncic, what he's done in the playoffs over his career, not just this season, is pretty unimpeachable. To win these series when he just doesn't have the better team, it seems, going in. Certainly does not have as deep a team as the Oklahoma City Thunder, the number 1 overall seed. And to do what he's done is remarkable. To do what he did in this series with all the wing defenders that Oklahoma City can throw at him, playing injured, seeming to re-injure, old injuries, and to will his team to a series win like this, with the help of Kyrie Irving, to be sure. It solidifies Luka Doncic's standing in the game as one of the best, one of the 2 or 3 or 4 best players in basketball. Now, if they could go beat the Wolves, if they could go to the finals, that's the next step. He still has to prove that part of it before we can mention him with Jokic, with Giannis. Right now, they are levitating a level above the Embiid, Shea, and Luka group. You can say Luka's levitating above those guys too if you want, but you got to make it to a finals. You got to win a chip. Those are just the stakes. And finally, the New York Knicks lost Jalen Brunson to a fractured left hand during Game 7 against the Indiana Pacers. The final injury report of the season for the Knicks included Brunson, starting forward Julius Randle, starting forward OG Anunoby, new starting forward Josh Hart, backup forward Bojan Bogdanovic, and backup center Mitchell Robinson. As it turns out, maybe Tom Thibodeau's players haven't had freak injuries, and it has something to do with everyone playing 40-plus minutes all season. Who would have thought? Are you watching Fox Sports or ESPN on your TV all day? Have to turn down the volume with all that shouting? Make the switch to Locked On Sports today, a free 24/7 sports streaming channel programmed for you every day to bring you the biggest stories without all the screaming. Locked On Sports Today brings you can't miss analysis, opinions, and news streaming 24/7 on YouTube or the free Amazon Fire TV channels app. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Coming up on the next Locked On Sports Today, the Pacers and Celtics tip off in the Eastern Conference Finals. So at least until tomorrow, stay locked on sports today.
Locked On Podcast Network presents Locked On Sports Today.
For more episodes of Locked On Sports Today, go to our video on demand. Click on Sports at the top of your screen. There, you'll find past episodes of Locked On Sports Today, plus other Locked On shows on demand.